Welcome to Relationship Talk, the podcast where we have real conversations about love, well-being, dating, and relationships. In today's episode, I had a boundary affirming conversation with Dr. Jen Fry, who is a conflict literacy expert, sports geographer, tech founder, TEDx speaker, and sought after speaker. She owns JenFryTalks, an organizational change firm that sits at the intersection of conflict and culture. It specializes in transforming organizational dynamics by addressing how conflict and culture shape leadership and overall business outcomes. She has also just released her first book entitled I Said No: How to Have a Backbone and Boundaries Without Being a Jerk. You can find out more about Jen's truth-led work in the show notes. During this conversation, Jen shares what conflict in the context of intimacy and emotional connection looks like and how to have healthy conflict. She debunks the common belief that couples who never argue are doing better than everyone else. She explains what happens to someone's mental health when they are constantly avoiding conflict or silencing their own needs to keep the peace, alongside the power of micro self-advocacy for standing up for yourself and setting the boundaries, and so much more. You are about to get the whole RLT, aka Relationship Talk, so you're going to want to watch the entire episode. I hope you will find this conversation as empowering as I did. And remember to subscribe, hit that like button and that notification bell. I'm Teresha Young, your international wellness and relationship coach. Enjoy, take notes, and get ready to apply all key messages you take away today. Hello, Dr. Jen Fry. How are you doing today?
I am absolutely amazing, Teresa. And thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you for being here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Really looking forward to having a discussion with you today because, oh, especially when it comes to your book as well, let's just delve straight into it because what we're going to really be talking about is conflict, really, boundary setting, and the various different things that show up for us as people along this journey. And Jen has got a lot of information to share, a lot of experience, and she's well equipped in this area. So I would love for you to share with us, Jen, what led you to doing the great work that you do?
So kind of to take a step back to go forward is I'm a former college volleyball coach. I coached for about 15 years and I left coaching to become a professional speaker. I'm in the US and I was first talking about race and sport
Mm.
and kind of that intersection. And as I kept moving through my facilitations, one thing became apparent is that we're talking about really hard topics and no
Mm.
one knew how to navigate conflict.
Yeah.
You can't talk about inclusion without conflict. Like it's just a normal part of it. It's a part of change. And so as I started to pay more attention to it, I in my presentation started to dive deeper into it. I'd make the sport part, the race part shorter, the conflict part bigger, and really start to see how people were reacting. And I made the jump to talking about conflict because if I can help people have a solid foundation of navigating conflict, I can help them in all facets of their life. I can help them
Mm.
in work, I can help them navigating inclusion, I can help them with their personal relationships, be a better spouse, a better sibling, a better parent, all of those things. And so for me, in some ways, I feel like conflict is the bedrock of humanity. If we can be better at conflict, we can be better humans. And so that's really what led me on this journey to
Mm.
start diving into a tough topic and
Yes.
helping people learn how to navigate this type of topic.
Yeah. Thank you for that because as you said, conflict is something that is part of our navigation of life. And many people grow up believing that less conflict means healthier relationships, for
Absolutely.
example. So, how do you view conflict in the context of intimacy and emotional connection?
There's a phrase I love, and it says, conflict shows us the depth of our relationships. You cannot have a deep relationship without conflict. It's impossible. And whenever I see people kind of brag about, my partner and I, we've never fought. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, T minus 10 days before y'all break up. Like
Yeah.
that, you can't have two completely different individuals, and there's no butting of heads on anything. Like even with your siblings who you will share some of the same blood, it's like World War III sometimes. But for some reason, this other person you have no grappling with, I find that impossible.
Yeah.
And to me, if you're able to have conflict, you're able to navigate through tough things, you're able to have hard conversations. And many times, conflict is not the problem, it's how people are treated in conflict is the
Mm,
problem. And that's the thing about it is that people many times are unwilling to engage in conflict because of how they're treated. Not
yes.
necessarily, it's not that they don't want to talk about the topic, it's that they don't want to be yelled at, cussed at, badgered, belittled,
Mm,
whatever it is. And so for me, and in any intimate relationships, friendships, family, romantic, there has to be a navigation of conflict. Be able to tell you, you hurt me, I hurt you, right? I'm mad, sad, angry, any
yeah.
type of emotion. And if you don't have that, your relationships are not going to be as deep as you want them to be. Because also there's so much growth and love on the other side of conflict. I think about some of my best relationships, and there has been a level of conflict to them,
Yeah.
right? We've had to tussle, we've had to figure out how to get on the other side of it. We've had to figure out how to have the conversations, even though we're in different states and we don't want to talk to each other. Right? Like you have to figure out all of those type of things because before you would be living in the same neighborhood, you would be seeing people.
Yes.
Now I could never pick up the phone again, and that's it. And so for me, it's when I think about the relationships that have dissipated
Mm,
because of maybe a misunderstanding or conflict, I many times think that there's always the opportunity for stuff to circle back. I
mm,
become very um, open to reconciliation, and I think many times people don't understand that. They think that once we stop talking, that's we're done, we'll never talk again. And that's just not true.
yeah.
Sometimes there's a circle back and you're able to reconvene stronger. But the one rule that I have is that I will never restart a relationship of any type without talking about that main thing that made us stop talking. I will never do that. We have to talk about the elephant in the room because our relationship will not be able to grow if we don't talk about it.
Mm. And that puts people in a very uncomfortable state
Absolutely.
because when I reached out to my audience and I let them know that I was going to be having a conversation with you, I had a few questions come through from the audience. And one of those questions was, I've grown up in a family where conflict was either explosive or completely ignored.
Mhm.
How do I even begin to learn what healthy conflict looks like as an adult? So
Uh-huh.
I know you spoke about reconciliation and all that kind of stuff, but what does then healthy conflict look like?
That is such a beautiful statement because it's acknowledging how much the past has an effect on the current state of who they are.
Mm,
And many people don't think about that. Many people are like, well, this is just how I am. You didn't just grow up from like a piece of tree bark. Like, think, right? Like, this is not who you are. You are a compilation of everyone in your life.
yeah.
And so, the first thing when you think about, because I would say the high majority of us are not taught healthy conflict. The high majority of us are taught unhealthy conflict. There's a
Yes.
few amount that are taught actually what healthy conflict looks like. And
Mm,
so to me, the very first step is to really start diving into how you were taught about conflict. And what I mean by that is, the person was like, "Oh, I was taught to ignore." So first thing you say is like, "Well, how did my parents and their parents interact in conflict? Was
mm,
it that, my mom was immediately just really submissive to my grandparents? Did my mom just do whatever was said? Did my mom not want to rock the boat, keep the peace?" Well, then those are things that I was taught. And starting to dive into the relationship with your parents and their parents, and then to think about the relationship with your parents and you. And I
yeah.
think in that respect, so an example would be my mom had five kids by the time she was 25 and then adopted me at 41. So when you have five kids that young, you don't have time for conflict.
Yeah.
My mom's favorite phrase was because I said so. And Because you really don't like you can't you have 5 kids, you don't have time to tussle with kids.
Yeah.
And so she learned just to be super conflict avoidant. And
Yeah.
so I grew up with conflict avoidant, right? I literally grew up that my if I started to even get a little bit upset about something, she would be like, look at this, look. And I would remember being so mad because I would just want to talk about the thing and she was doing everything to not talk about it. Which, guess what? Instead of just talking about the thing, now I'm exploding because I feel like I'm silenced. And so now I don't have a voice. And so now I'm exploding and angry because I just want to talk. And so guess what I'm taught? I'm taught that you don't say anything and then you blow up.
Yeah.
And so, so that's why I say that you have to get really close with how you were raised in conflict to start seeing what you need to change and why, in some ways, you feel that your voice is not important to say how you're
Mm,
feeling.
mm,
Right? Like, why are you taught that you have to be silent in the face of your pain? Why do you have to be silent in the face of your hurt? And really starting to dive into that because that's the first way to start going towards healthy conflict. If you can't even start to think, why do I feel like I can't speak up? Well, how can you even have healthy conflict? You
mm.
can't. I think
Yeah.
the next thing when you talk about kind of on this idea of like navigating healthy conflict is understanding that emotion is going to be there. I see kind of two two aspects. The first one is how people pride themselves on being logical and not emotional,
Yes.
right? Like there's this pride and almost a weaponizing of it, right?
Yes.
Teresa, I want to have this conversation, but you're just not thinking logical. You're just emotional, right?
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
this weaponizing of emotion
Yeah.
to make you almost not have it or to believe that you shouldn't have it. So now you're sucking all your emotion in and not able to have a healthy dialogue.
Mm.
Um, the next part about it, on the flip side, though, is understanding that people are going to emote and they deserve to emote. And that's a part of healthy conversation is that if I have to tell you something hard, you get to emote about it. And many people don't think about that. They'll be like, oh, I don't want to tell Teresa this hard thing because she's going to
Yeah.
be mad. Yeah, Sherlock. Like,
Yeah.
of course she's going to be mad. Like, she
Yeah.
deserves to be mad. You're going to tell her that you thought you bought the tickets to her favorite show and you actually forgot. Of course she's going to be mad. She deserves to be angry.
Yes.
Right? So guess what people do is they're like, oh, I don't want to tell Teresa I didn't buy the tickets to her show. And it's a month out where maybe Teresa could have been like, let me get on Ticketmaster, let me find them. So instead, you're like, oh yeah, Teresa, I got the tickets, everything's fine. And then it's maybe like a day or two where now if Teresa were to try and buy the tickets, it's triple the price.
Yeah.
And you're telling her, well, actually, I forgot. But don't be mad. Don't be angry. You took away any option for me to be able to do something about it because you were worried about my emotion. And now we're at a point where if I do buy the tickets, I'm even more pissed off because instead of being $100, they're $300. Instead of me having the seats I want, I'm up running the spotlight damn near, right? Like you take away any option for me to have a decision in it. And you don't want me to be upset. That's so
Yes.
unfair. And so I think I see those kind of two parties. And so to kind
Mm.
of reiterate is that A, this idea between logical and emotional, both can happen at the same time. I can be hurt and still logical. And then on the flip side, when things are happening, people deserve to have emotions.
Yes. So I want to just unpack what you said there in the stages that you said. So the first one, when you spoke about, as in look back on your childhood upbringing and then go a bit deeper, then you can look at your grandparents and the dynamics between your grandparents and their parents. So something that really stood out for me when you were talking there, Jen, was my upbringing and my perception of conflict. So when I saw conflict within my family, what I saw led to domestic violence. So
Mhm.
whenever there was conflict, it did ultimately, sometimes, most times actually, that leads to my dad feeling lots of rage and they're taking it out physically on my mum. So my mom, therefore, stayed silent, almost became a people pleaser, so to speak, in that time. You know,
Yep.
the yes, the yes. So then that's what I saw and started to model in my relationships as well going forward, whatever relationship it might have been, romantic relationships, friendships. But I saw the silence. It's best to stay quiet.
Mhm.
Otherwise, there's going to be a serious consequence to it. And I
Yep.
think it's the consequences that can get people stuck in that situation. So, for example, let's have a look at the people pleasing side of it as well, because I had another question come in from the audience saying that I can recognize when I'm people pleasing, but in the moment, I find myself still saying yes when I mean to say no. How can I stop this real time? And I think that, happens even for the people like myself when I've worked through this over the years. It's like, I, I really want to say no, but if I say no, there's going to be a consequence. So I'm guessing this is about boundaries in the way too.
Well, I think the thing is that in reality, there's going to be a consequence regardless.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and people don't think about that. Like, there's a consequence regardless. People look at the effects of the no as a consequence versus looking at the thing you have to do that you absolutely hate doing that's taking time away as a consequence as well. Both are consequences. You just have to determine what consequence is kind of the one you don't want to deal with.
Yeah.
And that's the way I look at it. Saying a full no is really hard for people. So instead, what they do is they give folks hope. Instead of just saying, I cannot be at your event, they'll say, well, it depends on the time.
Yes.
Maybe if I finish work early.
Mm-hmm.
And they do all these things where you give people hope. And I
Mm-hmm.
always say, you cannot give people hope. You can't. Because now they're going to be upset that, well, you said you can maybe be there if this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
Instead, say no. And if you can surprise them, surprise them. But giving full no's is really difficult for people. And they, like I said, they always look at the effects of the no as the consequence. I'm like, look at the effects of everything you have to do as the consequence.
Yes.
And that is a consequence of it. And so for me, I think the first thing is that when it comes to people pleasing, how early can you give the no? Like
Mm,
like the example with the tickets. If you
yes.
can give a no early, are there going to be some emotion? Yeah, but it's not going to be as bad as if you can't get the thing done. You do a crappy job on the thing. You can't be at the event, right? Like the effects of saying yes and not following through to me are way more detrimental
Yes.
than
Yes.
the effects of just saying no. I would rather say no and you're upset versus I say yes and I give you a really crappy product and now you're frustrated with me. Or I can't meet a deadline or a timeline
Yeah.
for a client and the company looks bad. And
Yeah.
so to me, I would rather like, how do I do it as early as possible
Mm,
versus waiting and now there's a lot more problems. But we have to remember that when you're a people pleaser, there's always going to be a consequence. The problem is that in some ways, you would rather the consequence affect you than affect the other person.
mm. Yeah. So I think that leads us really nicely onto your book then, when we're talking
Yeah.
about no's and consequences. And there we go. There it is. I said no, how to have a backbone and boundaries without being a
Mhm.
jerk.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Which you describe as a no BS guide to
Yeah.
standing up for yourself without feeling guilty. So many
Mhm.
people face challenges around setting limits, particularly when it comes to love and when it comes to dating. So, what do you think is causing this pattern of struggle to say no? So, why is it so common? And is it just the feeling of guilt, or is it other things that are preventing people from saying no?
Are we talking about to me in romantic relationships or personal?
Let's talk more on the romantic side. Let's move into the love and dating side of it, because that's predominantly what my audience are tuning in for.
I I think there's a few things, and I have been guilty about this in the past. I think One of the reasons why we don't say no is we believe so much in potential. We believe so much in like if Teresa just does this, this, and this, they will be great, right? And many times the things we look at them as potential is our view if we did it that way. Right. And so we look so much at potential. And even though we see the red flags, even though we see all the problems, we keep it like, well, if I don't help them out this time, and we think like, if I don't help them with their college degree, they won't. And then we think so far in the future with the potential
Yeah.
instead of saying no, because we don't want the ramifications of not being known as someone who didn't support our partner, who wasn't there when they needed us, right? Like all of those things, we don't want to be known as that person. And so we keep putting ourselves out there because we don't want that person is successful and then we weren't the person with them. I think about with my ex, and I remember talking to someone and he gave the analogy of he just treated his first wife really badly. Like just not in like abuse, but just wasn't a good husband or a good dad. He just wasn't.
Yeah.
And the ex-wife got tired of it and so ended up divorcing him. And then he got a new wife and they're doing really well. And I remember him saying, like, if my first wife had stuck it out with me, and I'm like, you would not wanted that woman to army crawl through the Spartan race with you even more.
Yeah.
And like that, but that's what we think about. If we just stay long enough, it's gonna work out. It's gonna pan out for us.
Yeah.
And like that's a thing, instead of just saying, no, it's not. And if it does, good job for them. But like this idea that we have to stay in it because it
Mm.
will pan out for it, right? That's always the story of look at them. She stayed by his side for 20 years and he cheated and was broke. And now look at them living the life. And I'm like, you wanted this woman to go through that much friggin' trauma
Yeah.
to hopefully come out on the end. And that's a part of it is that so women don't say no and they keep in these situations which are not good for them because they're worried they'll miss out on all the work that they've put in. Right? That the worst thing could be that you built this Mercedes and
Mm.
the only thing they needed was an engine and you left before they got the engine and now they're doing well. And like
Yes.
that's the thing is that you have to let that go. If they do well, they do well. If not, if not. But we sit there and like I joke with my friends, I said, I at 45, I'm not building anything. I'm not even building a piece of IKEA furniture. I'm not building a bear. I'm not building a human.
Yeah.
Because we sit there and we see the things that we should be saying no to, loaning money, helping out so much. I see these women who are dating guys with kids and will just be like almost like another babysitter and don't want to say no to that. And because,
Mm.
well, like, oh, you're not going to watch your future stepkid, right? Like all that. They don't set any boundaries because they're worried of missing out on something that they put all the work in. And
Mm.
you have to let that shit go. Like you have to let it go. It's what's it called? The sunken cost fallacy. You're so worried about the time and money you put in of not getting it back that you stay in for longer and spend more money and more time and
Mm.
now you're instead of getting out at 2 years, you're now 5 years in, 10 years in. You
Mm.
got kids, you got a mortgage, and you can't get out because you were afraid that you would miss out on the thing that is going to take 20 years of your life to actualize, 20 years of your life to actualize? No,
Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah.
not.
So, for those people in particular, how do they grow a backbone and how do they set boundaries without being a jerk? What does that even look like?
It looks like understanding how you're setting the boundaries. There was a friend of mine who read my book and sent me just a beautiful text message, and he said, I have no problem setting boundaries," he said, "but now I've realized the way I set them can be a problem."
Ooh.
And I was like, man, he's like, that was like 12 pages in. He said, I read your book. And so I think the thing about it is that when you're setting boundaries, how are you setting them? Where are you setting them at? What does it sound like? What does it look like? Is it the boundary of just saying, for Thanksgiving, I'm only bringing two sides. Like that's all I'm bringing. And I understand, Teresa, that you love X and Y, but I'm only bringing two sides. You pick what I want. Instead of the boundary set like that, the boundary's like, I can't believe it. I cook and I do all this and no one appreciates me. And right, like there's a difference. And so how do you set those boundaries in a way where you're saying exactly what it is? There's no question about it because you can't set a boundary and be like, well, maybe if I have time to make other ones, you're not setting a boundary. And so really ask yourself, how am I saying it? And like I tell folks, the first time you set the boundary will always be the easiest. Always. Because when you said it, you've just said the thing. Now you have to be prepared for someone to keep asking you and asking you. And that's where people get
Yeah,
frustrated and they're not prepared for it. Right? Like people come up to me and they'll be like, I set the boundary and people didn't listen. And I'm like, you have been known for your whole life to be a people pleaser. And now you set this boundary, you think everyone will be like, okay. Okay, we
exactly.
no,
You've
no, people are gonna keep
changed.
right. Okay, you're done.
You're,
Good.
you've
No,
changed. Yeah.
they're gonna keep pushing and pushing and pushing to get you to move that boundary. And that's why, and then it's not just them, it's gonna be like 10 people. So say for instance, Teresa's like, I am only gonna make two sides for Thanksgiving. That's my boundary. Well,
Yeah.
then guess what? Your sister calls and she's like, but I really like this thing. Can you please make it? Can you please? And then your brother calls. Oh, Teresa, I love when you make the turkey. You make it in a special way. I can't make it. And then your mom calls. Teresa, I don't feel good. I can't make food. I have to watch after your grandma, blah, 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 blah. And then your dad calls. I've been working overtime. I can't do this, that, and the other. So instead of you pushing on the boundary with one person, you have to uphold it with five people.
Oh, yeah.
And that's when people are just like, okay, I'll do it. Because that's why I said the first one's easy. Now you have to keep on for five people in different ways, phone calls, emails, texts.
Yeah.
That's why you have to understand when you set a boundary, it will take a while and you have to keep on it.
You have to. And when you were just replaying that situation, and I thought, oh my gosh, no, I felt overwhelmed by it. And then I also felt guilty for
Yep.
saying no. So, how do you, okay, this might be the first time you're doing it, and you're going to have to do it a few times in order for it to become normal and natural for you. But how do you sit with that guilt? Because even if you say no, there's going to be that feeling of guilt that ultimately many people will feel for saying no, and that whole you've changed, you're not the same person. Like, how do you sit with those things?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is you have to be practicing micro advocacy. You can't start out with the big I'm not making Thanksgiving dinner. You have to start what are small ways you can advocate for yourself. Advocate with yourself with your boss, your relationship. You go to get your nails done, the color's wrong. Like how do you advocate for yourself? So those are like the first things that are really
Okay.
important to build it up. I think the second thing is that when people say you've changed, you're right, I have. Like, I think what's bad about changing, right? Like, you should be growing and changing because when people say that, it's kind of like used as a weapon of you're not doing the things I want you to do. And so many people will be like, no, I haven't changed. I'm the same. Girl, okay, I've changed. You are 100% right. I have. And so the thing about it is when you sit with the guilt, just sit with it. It's okay if you feel guilty. It is
Mm,
completely okay. No
okay.
one's saying you're not going to feel guilty, but you have to sit with why do you feel guilty? Why are you so worried that they're going to be upset with you? Like asking yourselves the why. And it's okay to say, I know when I make this decision, this boundary, I'm going to feel guilty. It's okay. And I know that people are going to try and make me feel even guiltier and I have to sit with it and really sit with the emotions, sit with why I'm so worried about it, and just really go through it. Because if you're not kind of attaching the words and feelings to you and figuring out the whys, you're not going to move through the guilt. And there's not saying that sometimes, like I was talking to my friend, we went to Cancun for Thanksgiving, and I think she has six kids. She has six siblings. She also has a kid. And last year, she made Thanksgiving dinner when she wasn't feeling well. And she was like, I'm never doing this again. And so we went to Cancun. And when she was telling her son was like, I love, this is our time and I love this tradition. And she literally was like, this is time for you to find your new traditions. Like this is you're 20 something. And yeah, she felt guilty, but you have to look at the bigger picture of your needs and wants and how people use guilt to not really care about them.
Yeah. So, being that you're big on communication and
Yeah.
navigating conflict, then there are various different techniques out there that can help people with conversations because this might be feel
Yeah.
very uncomfortable for some people. You know, there's techniques such as the non-violent communication, compassionate communication. Now, is there a way that you can approach these difficult conversations in a structured way? So somebody might say, in actual fact, I need to write this down. So how do I structure a difficult conversation? So hopefully try and navigate any potential conflict.
Yeah, I think like when you talk about like nonviolent communication, that's more like activism type of stuff. Like you're
Mm,
not, if you have to implement nonviolent communication with the people around you, there's a bigger issue.
mm,
Like you like there's a way bigger issue. I think the way to structure it is first to really think about time and place, right? Time and place are so critical. You
yes.
can't have an actual conversation and there's 15 people around you, right? You
In a
can't.
cafe. Oh yeah.
In a cafe.
In a
Here, let
coffee
me
shop.
actually,
Yeah.
I have a document, I'll pull up that I can go through it. But like,
Yeah.
I think so many times what people do is that they will literally be somewhere and it's a really, really bad place and they want to have the conversation. And I think many times they kind of have this idea that there's power in doing it in front of everyone,
Whew.
right? There's power, and the reality of it is that there's not. There's not. So let me
Yeah.
pull up this. And so the first thing of this that's kind of the end of it. But the first thing about it is that when you're talking about having to have a conversation with someone that's hard,
Yeah.
I think the first thing is that just to be able, like many people don't understand when you pause, you have an opportunity just to breathe. Just to like I know I have to have this conversation. It's going to be hard. Let me just breathe. Let me
Mm,
just breathe. Let me just kind of think through it and be willing to pause. I think the next thing is that you're assessing yourself during the conflict. You know, your my emotions, my thoughts, my reactions. Why am I starting to get like there will be conversations that I have with my chief of staff, and during it, one of us might be like, why am I getting so upset right now? Like,
mm.
what is
Ooh.
this? It's making me really frustrated. And you have a little bit of self-reflection in the middle because it might be you're like, why is my reaction feel so over the top where it's a small thing? And you're able to kind of think about yourself in the middle of what's going on in more of a deeper way. The next thing, like I said, is that you're understanding the location because we can't have a really deep, intimate conflict in a cafe with 40 people around. We can't navigate a conflict during a holiday dinner and the whole family's in the house.
Yes.
Right? It's okay if you're like, we'll circle back to this. Now, I'm not saying if someone says something problematic, right? Sexist, whatever it is that you're not, you absolutely say something. But when
Yeah.
it comes to conflict, it can be done at a different time and place. And
Mm,
to say that, right? Like we'll just talk about this later and not like the ominous like
yes.
we'll talk about this later.
Yes.
But it's
Yeah.
like we will finish this conversation later where we can actually open up in dialogue. Because many times what will happen is that one person is just sitting there taking it all because they don't want to say anything. Or
Mm,
you have this explosive fight where no one's hearing themselves and everyone's watching.
yes.
The next one is that, you know, when we really try and figure out what the problem is we're talking about
Mm,
and
yeah, it's true.
actually naming it, sometimes people will beat around the bush versus actually naming what it is that is upsetting to them, is frustrating. Because I don't know about you, but there have been many times I've been really frustrated and it's been a complete miscommunication.
Yes.
And people are blowing up and it was just a complete miscommunication.
Yeah.
And so really understanding like what is this thing that we're talking about? What
Yeah.
is our main focal point? And
Mm,
then you're just explaining from yourself. Here's not because it's easy to be like, you never do this, you always do this, you, versus saying like, this is how I feel. I feel frustrated, I feel upset, I feel disappointed, and you're speaking from yourself. And knowing also that one thing that I don't have in there is that you can always circle back if it starts to get really hard. You can circle back. And many
Mm.
people think that, there's a difference from belaboring a point versus circling back to finish the conversation. There's a
Oh,
difference.
gosh.
And
Abs-
and one thing we don't understand is that when someone is belaboring a point, they don't feel like they've been heard.
mm,
They keep coming
yeah,
back, but they don't feel like they've been heard.
yeah,
And so really ask yourself, has this person felt like they've been heard? And the amount of times because people will be like, why do you keep coming back to
yeah,
this? It was probably because they don't feel like they've been heard. And
exactly.
but that is a difference of I heard you, I talked about it, we're figuring out what to do, but you keep coming back. Then the question I'll ask people is what do you need for closure? Like what is it you need? And many times people don't know. They're just sitting in their anger. And so really asking like what is it you need so that they can start understanding the next steps.
Oh, brilliant. I love the way that you have walked through that. And it's that closure. And surely once you get that closure, you then start to regulate your nervous system because
Yeah.
the nervous system is going to be all out of whack, whilst things are very, very uncertain. And you've spoken about anger there. And just to also circle back to what you were talking about in terms of logic versus emotions and to really sit, and
Yeah.
both can be at play there. So what does it look like to be able to engage with somebody when you are angry without saying something that you're later going to regret or doing something that you're later going to regret? Because I think anger is one of those big, quote unquote, big emotions that people would probably label, I feel happy, sad, angry.
Yeah.
So what does communication, now, how do you communicate well when you're angry?
I mean, it's different for different people. For me, when I'm angry, because also I've been doing this work so much, I try to be very thoughtful about my words in the moment. So I'm thinking about them more intently than I do because I understand the ramifications of them more.
Yes.
And so I think in that aspect, when you're angry, it's and it could be, it always depends on who I'm talking to, all of that, but especially if it's a relationship I have with someone, I try and be very thoughtful about my words.
Okay.
I try and think about the effects of them.
Mm,
Not, it's not that I'm holding in my truth, but it's like if I say this thing, what potentially can be the effects?
okay.
And is it effects that is worth it? I try and pay attention to my body language. I
Mm,
try and pay attention to the points in the conversation where I start to maybe play on my phone, fidget. Those are the hard ones where I need to just sit and be present because I don't think a lot of people understand that is whenever the moment gets hard, it's easy to go to your phone. It's easy to do other
oh,
stuff
yes.
versus
Yeah.
just like sit there and have the conversation and
Yeah.
the hardness of it. I think it's about regulating your tone and not having it go right too high with it, but really keeping a moderate tone whenever you're having that conversation.
Mm,
I think it's about, like I said, body language, and I think it's about thinking when we get over this, how do I want you to view me? That's what I think about whenever we get over this. How do I want this relationship to be? Do I want you to come and still talk to me? Do I want you to have a level of comfort? Or now are you afraid of me because of how I've exploded on you? And so I try and think about all of those things and in having the conversation and understanding that sometimes there's going to be a few more iterations of the conversation and be open to that, knowing that sometimes people will pick what could be seeming a bad time. Like, for instance, we just had a wonderful day out and now you want to bring up the conflict. And people will be like, why? Why would you do that? Well, when would you want them to? Would you want them to bring it up and pile on a whole bunch of other ones? Like,
mhm.
what is the best time when you're home from work and you're upset?
Yes.
So, really understanding that if someone's bringing it up, especially if it's not in front of people, it's the time to talk about it and have that conversation.
Mm, brilliant. So just working through everything that you said there, because It feels to me like this is stuff that you have to practice just as part of a daily
All the
practice
time. All the
all the
time.
time. So you don't just say that self-awareness for moments of conflict. This is like even sitting down when you are in your own space to say, how am I feeling right now? What am I doing right now? So this is work that you do, quote unquote work, every single day, like constantly.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to save self-reflection for the hard time because you're
Yeah,
not going to know how to reflect during the hard time. Like you're not.
exactly.
It's like saying I'm not going to practice this skill in sport, but then once a championship is here, I'll be able to do it. Yeah, no, that's not how it
Yeah,
works.
yeah.
And so for me, like there'll be times where I'm really anxious and I'll sit down and be like, why am I so anxious? Like what about like what's going on that has me just feel anxious? What about it is having me feel stressed? And so I try to sit down and reflect on my emotions in the moment to help me with that learning.
Yes, yeah. So I guess those are one of the practice that you can do is the self-reflection and just to do
Yeah.
that as part of your daily practice. Are there any other daily practices that you can share that would help people to be able to just, navigate these situations too?
Yeah, I think it's like I said, being willing to do micro self-advocacy of like in moments where your boss wants to give you some more work, your coworker is trying to have you do their work. Like there are moments where you start pushing back and understanding that there might be some your coworker might say something, they'll be okay. Right? Maybe it's that your kid, instead of you going to pick them up, they can just take the bus. They'll be upset, but they'll be okay. And they might come home, Mom, why'd you make me take the bus? Because I didn't feel like going and picking you up,
Yeah.
and they'll be upset, but you have to learn to just start doing it versus try thinking that you'll wait till the big moment because you're not going to wait till the big moment. The big
Mm,
moment will pass you by because you've
yeah.
had zero practice.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Practice will help you with the progress that you're going to
You
make.
have to. You have to.
Absolutely. So, in terms of your book, then, Jen, is there anything else that you would like to share that we haven't covered in this that the listeners, would benefit from hearing right now?
I think there's one part in the book where I talk about how people don't people will make themselves feel like the victim so they don't have to acknowledge that they have to make a decision. And so an example I use is a friend of mine was waiting to go to a basketball game with one of her friends. And she was like, I want to leave at 5:15 to get there to see my friend play. And I remember coming home and it's like 5:40 and I'm like, what are you still doing here? And she's like, well, they're on their way. And I think about how much stuff we miss because of people being on their way. And
Mm,
so she wanted to leave at 5:15. It's now 5:45. It's 5:50. And I'm like, girl, you gotta get on the road. Like they start playing at 7. She's like, no, they're almost here. And I said, well, what are you gonna do? She's like, well, I'll just get in the car and be mad. And I said, you don't have a right to be mad. You could have left. You chose not to, and now you're gonna make the trip and the game a miserable experience.
mm,
Leave. And if they call and say, but I've been on my way, then you say, I wanted to leave at 5:15. You're 45 minutes late. It's
yes.
unacceptable. And be willing to put that boundary down. But many people are not. And so I got to tell her, I was like, you don't get to be mad. You don't get to wait something that you had full control of and then get in and be, "Ugh." No, you made that decision. Now you have to own up. But people don't want to acknowledge that they are making a decision. I'm like,
Mm.
girl, you have a car. It's not like she's your only ride. You
Yeah.
have a car, you just chose not to do it. And so
Ooh.
people don't want to admit that they are making decisions, but they want to make it seem like other people are making decisions. No, girl, you're making a decision.
Oh, but how disempowering is that to say that no, my actions and my behaviors are as a direct result of what you're doing? It's just
Yeah.
so it's just disempowering when I hear you say that.
Yeah, I mean, and people like, I have a friend who is horribly late. I mean, he will be 2 hours late. Like it's like
Ooh.
it doesn't even make sense. It's so and so here in DC, there's a really great place called Barmini, and they do a like six drink. It's like a 90-minute experience, and it's expensive as hell, and it's a great experience. And the first time we went, so you only have 90 minutes, and the first time we go, he's like 30 minutes late. And I am livid, livid. And I could have had two options. I could have had option of not saying anything and
Yeah.
just being mad or saying something. And so he gets there and I say, here's the deal. I said, I get you're going to be late. I said, but we only have 90 minutes. And if you're going to be late to this, I will not invite you. I just won't. If anything is timed, I won't invite you. And I
Yeah.
hate it because I love to experience it with you, but I just won't.
Yeah.
Now, there are other things where I know you're going to be late. I'll bring my laptop and just do work. But like something where it's really expensive and timed, no. And so for me, that was my boundary. And ever since then, if it's a timed event, he will be early.
Early, not even on time. He's early to
Yeah,
get
because the
there.
next time we went, they were like, "Oh, he's already there waiting for you." But like, I had to set that boundary because I could have just sat there and just been mad. And every time afterwards, I said no. And I said, "You don't have to accept, but understand the expectation is when we have the timed event,
Yes.
you are on time.
Yeah,
Follow."
absolutely.
And then and I told him the next time, I just won't invite you.
Yeah. And the great thing about that is that you set the consequence. You didn't
Yeah.
just say, for example, what the boundary was. You said, and next time you won't get invited. Of
Mhm.
course, he wants to be with you. Obviously, you've connected with something that he does
Yeah.
want. So he was like, well, fine, I will show up. Because sometimes you might
Yeah.
say, and the consequence is, and the other person says, well, I don't care.
Yeah.
But, but he actually cared about that. So I suppose it's setting also the consequence that actually may have some sort of impact on that person too. There's no point in setting some sort of consequence and the person's going to be like, well, that doesn't really matter to me. So I'm going to still do what I'm going to be doing. So
Well, in that point, then you get to decide if you invite them.
yeah,
Like if they're like, so I know I cannot get him to be on time every single time we meet up. That's unfair to him. But so that's why I was like, other times I'll just have my laptop and
yeah,
I'll just do work. But these specific times you need to be on
yeah.
time. And if he were to say, okay, I don't care, then I would say, I'm just not gonna invite you. And I wouldn't invite him. Like I'm not gonna have you say that and still invite you. Absolutely. And that's where people have to be able to set that down and then just not invite him.
Yeah.
Right?
I
Like
really love it.
it's really that simple. I
It
hate to
is.
say it's not easy, but it really is that simple.
And I really love what you've done there because you've realized where it can work and where it's not going to work, but you haven't
Yeah.
said no to the friendship. You haven't
Yeah.
said all or nothing. You said, okay, in that dynamic, it will work. And this. So, what you have created there is some flexibility in terms of how you navigate that friendship. Obviously,
Yeah.
other relationships and friendships will look different. But again, for the listeners, I think that's a really great insight to say that you just have to look at areas. You don't have to
Hmm.
look at the whole picture. It might just be at areas where you can tweak things and set different types of
Yeah.
boundaries. I think that's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you so, so much. I think we have like covered so much, and you have spoken a little bit about your relationships and learnings that you've had
Yeah.
there. So, one of the questions what I like to ask my guests on my show is what is their personal definition of love in the terms of romance?
I've been sitting and thinking on that. And oh my gosh, my personal definition of love, I think, is showing up for people.
Mm,
And I say that in terms of romance is that when you show up, you build a depth to a relationship.
mm,
And showing up in a romantic relationship might mean that your partner is playing a sports game and you go cheer them on. They're maybe practicing an instrument and they're going to be at a concert and you go and support them. They're sick or what, like there's so many different ways people can show up. And I think
mm.
to me, some folks forget about that. Like there's an importance of showing up for people, um, because it's something that you don't have to do. And so I think my definition of love is showing up for people.
Mm, that is amazing. You know what? I hold so much, conversations in the industry that I'm in, being wellness and relationships, and it's that presence showing up that is huge. And in whatever way that means for the dynamic, but just
Yeah.
showing up is really what people are asking for, that presence. Because when you were speaking before, when you're talking about, people falling for potential, that's in the future. And
Hmm.
sometimes we're just not present enough when it comes to our relationships. So I absolutely love that share. Jen, you have shared so much in this conversation today. And I know that people will be listening to this, taking notes, managing conflicts, stepping into their power, knowing how to set those boundaries, especially when you was talking about the way in which people set those boundaries and how you are, really saying that it's okay to actually have feelings of guilt. It's okay to feel emotions as well as logic. They run side by side. So thank you so, so much for this conversation. Another question that I do love to ask my guests as a parting tradition is one key takeaway to help our listeners along their journey of love, well-being, and relationships. And I'd love for you to share one of those takeaways.
Yeah, I think your relationship is worth conflict.
Yeah,
And some people might think that's really weird, but like I said, conflict shows us the depth of our relationships.
yeah.
And your relationship is worth the conflict. And if you are worried that if you say how you feel, the relationship might not exist, then maybe you shouldn't have that relationship because the
Mm,
relationship then doesn't have, it's not really deep,
yes, yes.
right?
Oh, that's going to land so well with many people. It's going to resonate because I know that you also speak about the importance of mental health. And when we're not navigating conflict and when we're silencing ourselves in order to keep the peace, for example, what does actually happen to people's mental health over time when things like that happen?
Oh my gosh, it disintegrates. Conflict is a mental health imperative. Right? Like and when you think about whenever you're having a argument with someone, it's, I'm not just focused on the argument right now. I'm focused on it for the next 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, eight
Oh,
days.
yeah,
I'm right, like I think about it all the time.
yeah,
Now, whenever the person texts me, I have the lens of that argument.
yeah,
When I talk to the person, I have the lens of that argument. When I talk to other people, I'm talking about that argument. Right? Every aspect of me is engulfed with it forever. If I feel like I'm owed an apology, I'm going to carry that with me. It is really a mental health imperative when people don't really use conflict in a way that can help build them and build the relationships. And so that's why I think when we talk about mental health and conflict, you can't be healthy mentally if you're not going to engage in conflict. Like it's impossible. You can't be a people pleaser and have a healthy mental state. You can't. You
yeah.
can't. You can't.
Wow. So this is also encouragement for people that is also linked to your personal well-being. It's also linked
Yep.
to your longevity of your mental health because so many people will sit and fester in that one argument that happened for days and that
Yes.
person's living their best life. They've
Baby,
walked
that
past.
person don't care about you. That person is gone. And
Exactly.
I mean, we've all done it where we have been sitting there for,
Yes.
I mean, days, weeks, months, thinking about that argument. And
Yes.
then we finally bring it up. The person's like, oh, you're so mad about that?
Yeah.
And you've been mad. You've been so mad.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's understanding that and catching ourselves in that moment and just thinking, yes, that person is gone. They're living their best life. They'll make sense back
100%.
what it is. And you've sat there letting your mental health and your well-being deteriorate.
Yep.
It's
Mhm.
really catching us in that moment to say, okay, caught myself. How can I move to a better feeling state?
Yep.
Jen, thank you so much. Where can the audience connect with you, purchase your book? Do share away.
Yeah, go on JenFryTalks and you can find this. You can go on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all the places. Go and buy the book. It will help you out, especially during this holiday time, which is fraught with conflict. It's all holiday time is conflict. So
Well,
yeah,
exactly.
and you can find me on all social media, JenFryTalks.
Brilliant. And I'm going to drop all of Jen's social media links into the show notes. And for those who are listening by audio, just to say the name of the book, it is.
I said no, how to have a backbone and boundaries without being a jerk.
There you go. And there will be a link to that inside the show notes too. Jen, once again, thank you so much for this wonderful
Yep.
conversation. I've really enjoyed it. And for everybody who has also tuned in, I want to thank you for your time, for your attention, and for your energy. And until the next episode, take great care of yourselves and others too.